I'm Ryan O'Dowd, and you're listening to Ryan's Audiobooks on the Issues Magazine YouTube channel. Today we continue with Section 6.3, Prometheus Rising, Robert Anton Wilson. Chapter 1, The Thinker and the Prover. All that we are is the result of all that we have thought. It's founded on thought, it is based on thought. Buddha and the Dhammapada. William James, father of American psychology, tells of meeting an old lady who told him the earth rested on the back of a huge turtle. "But my dear lady," Professor James asked, as politely as possible, "what holds up the turtle?" "Ah," she said, "that's easy. He's standing on the back of another turtle." "Oh, I see," said Professor James, still being polite. "But would you be so good as to tell me what holds up the second turtle?" "It's no use, Professor," said the old lady, realizing he was trying to lead her into a logical trap. "It's turtles, 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 all the way." Don't be too quick to laugh at this little old lady. All human minds work on fundamentally similar principles. Her universe was a little bit weirder than most, but it was built up on the same mental principles as every other universe people have believed in. As Dr. Leonard Orr has noted, the human mind behaves as if it were divided into two parts, the thinker and the prover. The thinker can think about virtually anything. History shows that it can think the earth is suspended on the backs of infinite turtles, or that earth is hollow, or that earth is floating in space. Comparative religion and philosophy show that the thinker can regard itself as mortal, as immortal, as both mortal and immoral, the reincarnation model, or even non-existent, Buddhism. It can think itself into living in a Christian universe, a Marxist universe, a scientific relativistic universe, or a Nazi universe, among many possibilities. As psychiatrists and psychologists have often observed, much to the chagrin of their medical colleagues, the thinker can think itself sick, and can even think itself well again. The prover is a much simpler mechanism. It operates on one law only. Whatever the thinker thinks, the prover proves. To cite a notorious example which unleashed incredible horrors early in the century, if the thinker thinks that all Jews are rich, the prover will prove it. It will find evidence that the poorest Jew in the most run-down ghetto has hidden money somewhere. Similarly, feminists are able to believe that all men, including the starving wretches who live and sleep on the streets, are exploiting all women, including the Queen of England. If the thinker thinks that the sun moves around the earth, the prover will obligingly organize all perceptions to fit that thought. If the thinker changes his mind and decides the earth moves around the sun, the prover will reorganize the evidence. If the thinker thinks holy water from Lourdes will cure the lumbago, the prover will skillfully orchestrate all signals from the glands, muscles, organs, etc., until they've organized themselves into good health again. Of course, it is fairly easy to see that other people's minds operate this way. It's comparatively much harder to become aware that one's own mind is working this way also. It's believed, for instance, that some men are more objective than others. One scientists, however, are still believed to be objective. No study of the lives of the great scientists will confirm this. They were as passionate and hence as prejudiced as any assembly of great painters or great musicians. It was not just the church, but also the established astronomers of the time who condemned Galileo. The majority of physicists rejected Einstein's special relativity theory in 1905. Einstein himself would not accept anything in quantum theory after 1920, no matter how many experiments supported it. Edison's commitment to direct current, DC electrical generators, led him to insist alternating current AC generators were unsafe for years after their safety had been proven to everyone else. Edison's pigheadedness on this matter was partly the result of his jealousy against Nikola Tesla, inventor of AC generators. Tesla, on the other hand, refused the Nobel Prize when it was offered to him, and Edison jointly, because he refused to appear on the same platform with Edison. Both these geniuses were only capable of objectivity in science in certain limited laboratory conditions. If you think you have a higher objectivity quotient than either of them, why haven't you been nominated for a Nobel Prize? Science achieves or approximates objectivity, not because the individual scientist is immune from the psychological laws that govern the rest of us, but because scientific method, a group creation, eventually overrides individual prejudices in the long run. To take a notorious example from the 1960s, there was a point when 3 research groups had quote-unquote proven that LSD causes chromosome damage, while 3 other groups had proven that LSD had no effect on the chromosomes. In each case, the prover had proved what the thinker thought. Right now, there are in physics 7 experiments that confirm a very controversial concept known as Bell's theorem, and 2 experiments that refute Bell's theorem. In the era of extrasensory perception, the results are uniform after more than a century. Everybody who sets out to prove that ESP exists succeeds. and everybody who sets out to prove that ESP does not exist also succeeds. Truth, or relative truth, emerges only after decades of experiments by thousands of groups all over the world. In the long run, we are hopefully approximating closer and closer to objective truth over the centuries. In the short run, Orr's law always holds. Whatever the thinker thinks, the prover will prove. And if the thinker thinks passionately enough, the prover will prove the thought so conclusively that you will never talk a person out of such a belief, even if it is something as remarkable as the notion that there is a gaseous vertebrate of astronomical heft, God, who will spend all eternity torturing people who do not believe in his religion. If the reader is a scientist, be not alarmed. This refers not to you, but only to the benighted fools in the opposite camp who refuse to recognize that your theory is the only reasonable one, of course. Exercises. Sad as it is to say, you never understand anything by merely reading a book about it. That's why every science course includes laboratory experiments, and why every consciousness liberation movement demands practice of yogas, meditations, confrontation techniques, in which the ideas are tested in the laboratory of your own nervous system. The reader will absolutely not understand this book unless he or she does the exercises given at the end of each chapter. To explore the thinker and the prover, try the following. 1. Visualize a quarter vividly, and imagine vividly that you're going to find a quarter on the street. Then look for the quarter every time you take a walk, meanwhile continuing to visualize it. See how long it takes you to find the quarter. 2. Explain the above experiment by the hypothesis of selective attention. That is, believe there are lots of lost quarters everywhere, and you are bound to find one by continually looking. Go looking for a second quarter. 3. Explain the experiment by the alternative mystical hypothesis that mind controls everything. Believe that you made the quarter manifest in this universe. Go looking for a second quarter. 4. Compare the time it takes to find the second quarter using the first hypothesis, attention, with the time it takes using the second hypothesis, mind over matter. 5. With your own ingenuity, invent similar experiments and each time compare the two theories, selective attention, coincidence, versus mind controls everything, psychokinesis. 6. Avoid coming to any strong conclusions prematurely. At the end of a month, reread this chapter, think it over again, and still postpone coming to any dogmatic conclusion. Believe it possible that you do not know everything yet, and that you might have something still to learn. 7. Convince yourself, if you're not already convinced, that you are ugly, unattractive, and dull. Go to a party in that frame of mind. Observe how people treat you. Believe or convince yourself mean to do what an actor does. Pretend until the pretense begins to feel real. Or as jazz musicians say, fake it till you make it. 8. Convince yourself, if you're not already convinced, that you're handsome, irresistible, and witty. Go to a party in that frame of mind. Observe how people treat you. 9. This is the hardest of all exercises and comes in two parts. First, observe closely and dispassionately two dear friends and two relative strangers. Try to figure out what their thinkers think and how their provers methodically set about proving it. Second, apply the same exercise to yourself. If you think you have learned the lessons of these exercises in less than 6 months, you haven't really begun working at them. With real work, in 6 months you should be just beginning to realize how little you know about everything. 10. Believe it possible that you can float off the ground and fly merely by willing it. See what happens. If this exercise proves as disappointing to you as it has to me, try number 11 below, which is never disappointing. 11. Believe that you can exceed all your previous ambitions and hopes in all areas of your life. All models are subject to revision as this book goes along. They are also subject to revision after this book is finished, by the author or the reader. Tentative Model 1. The perceived universe is a mixture of the real universe and our own thinker, proving its pet beliefs. Thus concludes Section 6.3, Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson. Chapter 1. Tomorrow we'll begin with Chapter 2, Hardware and Software, the Brain and its Programs. I will see you then. Alam.